The first time my parents let my sister speak for me, I was standing right there, holding a tray of drinks I wasn't allowed to set down. "She can't come," my mother said into the phone, her back turned to me. "She works weekends. You know how she is." I watched her nod, smile, laugh softly, and then hang up. My older sister, Rachel Miller, didn't even look at me. She just said, "Problem solved," like I wasn't a person at all. That was the moment I understood something had already been decided about my life, and I hadn't been invited to the meeting. Before I tell you how a waitress with no savings, no backup, and no family support ended up forcing everyone to finally say my name out loud, take a second. If stories about family drama, quiet revenge, and long-delayed payback pull you in, like the video, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. Now let me take you back to how this really started. My name is Claire Miller. I was 29 years old, and I worked as a server at a mid-range Italian restaurant in St. Louis called Trattoria Leone. Not glamorous, not a stepping stone to anything, according to my family. Just something I was still doing. My father, Richard Miller, liked to say it with a sigh. Still waiting tables. My mother, Helen Miller, preferred a softer knife. "It's fine for now, honey." Rachel never softened it. "I don't know how you're not embarrassed." What none of them ever asked was why I stayed. I worked 6 days a week, double shifts on Fridays. I averaged 19,000 steps a day. I memorized orders, allergies, preferences. I handled drunk customers, crying customers, entitled customers. I trained new hires. I covered shifts when people didn't show. I made $65,000 a year with tips, no benefits, no respect. And I was good at it. I didn't just serve food. I ran a floor. I kept things moving. When the kitchen backed up, I smoothed it over. When a table complained, I fixed it. My manager, Tom Alvarez, trusted me to close 3 nights a week because I didn't panic. But to my family, I was the failure. Rachel was 33, married, corporate job, marketing director at a regional healthcare company. Her LinkedIn was polished. Her life looked like something my parents could point at. "She figured it out," my mother liked to say. "You'll get there," as if I was late, not excluded. The small thing that tipped everything over happened on a Tuesday. It was my grandmother's birthday. Margaret Miller had raised us after my parents divorced briefly when I was 12. She taught me how to balance a checkbook and how to watch people closely without reacting. She died 2 years ago, and somehow, even after death, she was still the one holding the family together. Rachel had decided to host a private memorial dinner for Grandma Margaret's birthday at an upscale restaurant downtown. Family only. Special. Symbolic. I found out about it from Instagram. Rachel had posted a story. A long table. Candles. Wine glasses. Caption. Family first. Always. I stared at my phone during my break, fingers still smelling like garlic and lemon. No one had told me. I texted my mother. "Hey, I didn't know there was something planned tonight." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Oh, right. We assumed you couldn't make it with work." Assumed. I checked the schedule. I could have switched shifts. I had before. I always did. I drove to my parents' house after my shift ended. Still in my uniform, apron folded in my bag. They were already back. Rachel sat on the couch, heels off, wine glass in hand. My father watched TV. My mother was clearing plates. "Oh," Rachel said, "you're home early." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't accuse. I just said, "You didn't tell me." Helen avoided my eyes. It was last minute. It wasn't. Rachel had planned it for weeks. I knew because I'd heard her talking about it at Thanksgiving. Rachel shrugged. "You would have been working anyway." Richard didn't even mute the TV. "This is exactly why you need a real job, Claire. People can't plan around you." Something shifted then. Quiet. Final. "I wasn't invited," I said. Rachel smiled, thin and controlled. It wasn't intentional. That word again. Intentional. Like impact didn't matter. I looked at all 3 of them and realized something terrifying. They truly believed this was normal. That night, I sat in my car outside my apartment and didn't go inside for almost an hour. I thought about all the holidays I'd worked so Rachel could relax, all the birthdays I'd missed, all the times I'd been told, Next year will be different. I thought about Grandma Margaret and how she used to say, "Pay attention to who speaks for you when you're in the room." The next morning, I went back to work. Tom pulled me aside before the lunch rush. "You okay?" I nodded. "I need more hours." He studied me. "You already work the most." "I need to save," I said. "Fast." He didn't ask why. He just said, "I'll see what I can do." That was how it started. Not with a scream. Not with revenge. With a decision. 2 weeks later, my mother called. "Claire," she said carefully, "your father and I want to talk to you about something important." I leaned against the prep table, the kitchen loud around me. "What is it?" "It's about the house. The one Grandma Margaret left behind. The one my name was supposed to be on, too." My grip tightened on the phone. "I'll come by," I said. What I didn't know yet was that this conversation wasn't about inclusion. It was about erasing me completely. And this time, I wasn't going to let them do it quietly. My parents' house looked exactly the same as it always had. Same beige siding, same hydrangeas lining the walkway, same porch light that flickered when it rained. It was the kind of place that pretended nothing ever changed, even when everything underneath it did. I parked on the street instead of the driveway. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me already understood I wasn't supposed to take up space there anymore. When I walked in, my mother, Helen Miller, was already seated at the dining table with a folder laid out in front of her. My father, Richard Miller, stood near the window, arms crossed. Rachel Miller leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling on her phone like this meeting wasn't about me. "Sit," my father said. "Not sit down. Just sit." I took the chair opposite my mother. Helen folded her hands together. "This doesn't have to be emotional, Claire." That was always her opening line, before something deeply emotional. "You know Grandma Margaret's house has been sitting empty," she continued. "Taxes, maintenance, insurance, it's been a lot." I nodded. I knew. I'd helped clean it out. I'd sorted photo albums while Rachel had meetings. I'd boxed up sweaters that still smelled like lavender. "We've decided to sell it," Richard said. The word "decided" landed hard. "Okay," I said carefully. And Rachel and Mark are looking to buy a place," Helen added. "With the market the way it is, this just makes sense." Rachel finally looked up. "It's a great opportunity." My chest tightened. Grandma left instructions. Richard exhaled sharply. She left intentions, not legal guarantees. That was new language. Legal. "She wanted it to stay in the family," I said. "She talked to me about it." Rachel laughed once, short. "She talked to everyone, Claire." "No," I said. "She talked to me." Helen's smile flickered. "This isn't about favoritism. It always was." Richard opened the folder and slid a document across the table toward me. A release. My name, printed at the top. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. "It just acknowledges that you don't have a financial interest in the property," Helen said. "So we can move forward cleanly." "Cleanly," I repeated. Rachel crossed her arms. "You're not in a position to buy it. Be realistic." I stared at the paper, at the signature line waiting for me. "How much are you selling it for?" I asked. Richard hesitated. 480. I did the math instantly. The house was worth at least 600 in this market. "And Rachel's paying?" "Well," Helen said, "it's more of a family arrangement." Of course it was. They weren't selling it to her. They were handing it to her. "And what do I get?" I asked quietly. Rachel rolled her eyes. "You get freedom. You don't want to be tied down anyway." Helen reached across the table, touching my wrist. "This is best for everyone." I pulled my hand back. "Grandma wanted me on the deed," I said. Richard's jaw tightened. "That was never formalized." "Because you told her you'd handle it," I shot back. Silence. Rachel shifted uncomfortably. "This is getting dramatic." I stood up slowly, the chair scraping against the floor. "You already decided," I said. "You just want my signature so you don't have to feel bad about it." "That's not fair," Helen said. "Neither is this." Richard stood too. "Claire, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I looked at all of them. My parents, my sister, people who had watched me work myself raw and still spoke to me like I was irresponsible. "I'm not signing anything today," I said. Rachel scoffed. "Then we'll move forward without it." My stomach dropped. "You can't." Richard's eyes hardened. "Watch us." I left without another word. In my car, my hands finally shook. Not from sadness, from clarity. They weren't asking me to give something up. They were telling me I never had it. That night I worked a double. I smiled at tables. I refilled glasses. I carried plates heavier than my arms wanted to hold. Tom noticed. "You're quiet." "I'm focused," I said. At midnight, after closing, he handed me an envelope. "Extra shifts," he said. "I put you on brunches, too." I thanked him and meant it. Over the next 3 weeks, I stopped going to my parents' house. I stopped answering Rachel's texts. I worked, I saved, I watched, and I listened. Because waitresses hear things. A couple started coming in every Thursday. Older, well-dressed, quiet. They always asked for me. One night, the woman smiled at me and said, "You're very observant." I smiled back. It's part of the job. Her husband slid a card across the table when they paid. Susan Walker, it read. Estate planning attorney. "Call me," she said softly, "if you ever want to talk about your grandmother." My heart skipped. That night, I pulled out a box I'd kept under my bed since Grandma Margaret's funeral. Inside was a handwritten note she'd given me a year before she died. "Claire, trust your instincts. If they try to rush you, slow everything down." I slept with that note in my hand. 2 days later, Rachel showed up at the restaurant. Not to eat, to confront me. She stood near the host stand, heels clicking, eyes sharp. "We're listing the house next week," she said. "With or without you." I wiped my hands on my apron and looked her straight in the eye. "Then you'd better hope everything you're doing is legal," I said. Her smile faded, just a little. "What are you implying?" "Nothing," I replied calmly. "Just paying attention." That night, I called Susan Walker. And for the first time since Grandma died, I felt like someone was finally listening. What I didn't know yet was that my family had already crossed a line they couldn't walk back from. And I was about to find proof they never expected me to look for. Susan Walker didn't rush me. That was the first thing that told me she was different. We met on a Thursday morning at our office in Clayton, a quiet street lined with law firms and medical buildings. I arrived 10 minutes early, still wearing my non-slip shoes because I'd come straight from a breakfast shift. Susan Walker, silver hair pulled back neatly, greeted me herself. No assistant, no clipboard. Just a calm, assessing look. "Claire Miller," she said, shaking my hand. "Sit. Tell me about your grandmother. Not tell me what's wrong. Not tell me what you want. Just tell me about her." So I did. I told her about Margaret Miller, teaching me how to write everything down. About how she used to say, "If something matters, put it on paper." About how she'd whispered to me once, while Rachel was in the next room, "They underestimate you. Let them." Susan listened, without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands. "Did your grandmother ever show you her will?" I hesitated. Not the whole thing, but parts? Yes. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I'd taken 2 years ago. A single page. My name handwritten in the margin next to the house address. Susan's eyes sharpened. "This is significant," she said. "Did anyone else know you had this?" "No." "Good." She stood and went to a filing cabinet. When she returned, she carried a thick binder. "I handled Margaret Miller's estate planning," Susan said calmly. "I didn't administer it, but I drafted it." My pulse spiked. "Then you know what she wanted." "I know what she documented," Susan corrected. "And I know what was filed." She opened the binder and slid a copy across the desk. The will, not vague, not sentimental, specific. The house was to be placed in a family trust, split evenly between all living grandchildren, unless sold with written consent from each beneficiary. Each. My throat went dry. They told me it wasn't formal. Susan gave a small, knowing smile. "People say that when they want you to stop asking questions." "Then how are they selling it?" "They can't," Susan said. "Not legally. Not without your signature." I leaned back, dizzy. "Rachel said they'd move forward without me." Susan nodded. "Then they're either bluffing or they've already tried to bypass the trust." I swallowed. "How would they do that?" "By filing an affidavit claiming you waived interest," Susan replied. "Or by asserting the trust was invalid." "And would that work?" Susan closed the binder. "Only if no one challenges it." Silence settled between us. "Claire," she said gently, "have they asked you to sign anything?" I thought of the release. "Yes." Susan's jaw tightened. "That's not a coincidence." She slid another card across the desk. "This is Mark Reynolds, real estate litigation. If they list that house, you call him immediately. I stared at the card. I can't afford this, I said quietly. Susan met my eyes. You can't afford not to. I left her office feeling taller, steadier. At work that night, I paid closer attention than usual. The regulars, the conversations, the things people assumed a waitress wouldn't notice. And then I heard something that made my skin prickle. 2 men at table 12, suits, real estate talk. Yeah, Miller Property's going up, one said. Off-market deal, though, the other laughed. Family discount? Something like that. They're pushing it fast. Fast. Susan's words echoed in my head. If they try to rush you, slow everything down. I finished their check, walked to the back, and texted Mark Reynolds. They're listing it. He called me within 5 minutes. Claire Miller? His voice was sharp, efficient. Yes. Have you signed anything? No. Good. We need to act before they file. The next day, a letter went out. Certified. Legal language. Calm. Precise. Notice of beneficial interest. Any attempt to sell or encumber the property without unanimous consent will be contested. When my parents received it, they didn't call. Rachel did. She called while I was carrying drinks to a six-top. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. What the hell are you doing? You're humiliating us. I listened to it in the walk-in freezer, the cold biting my skin. I deleted it. That evening, I went to my parents' house one last time. Not to argue, to observe. The for sale sign wasn't up yet, but the realtor's card was on the counter. Papers stacked neatly near the dining table. Helen looked startled when she saw me. Claire, we weren't expecting. I know, I said. Richard appeared from the hallway, face hard. You went to a lawyer. Yes. You're overreacting. No, I said. I'm responding. Rachel stepped forward. You don't even want the house. That's not the point. Richard's voice rose. You're trying to sabotage your sister. I looked at him steadily. You're trying to erase me. Silence. Helen pressed her lips together. This is tearing the family apart. It was already torn, I said. You just didn't notice because I was the quiet side. Rachel laughed bitterly. So what now? You going to sue us? I don't want to, I said honestly. But I will. That landed. Richard exhaled sharply. You think you're smarter than us. I shook my head. I think you assumed I wasn't. I turned and left. 2 days later, the listing was pulled. Rachel blocked me on everything. My mother stopped calling. And my father did something I didn't expect. He went around me. A week later, Susan Walker called. Claire, she said, her voice tight. Your father filed a motion challenging the validity of the trust. My heart pounded. On what grounds? Undue influence, she replied. He's claiming your grandmother was manipulated. I laughed once, cold and sharp. He's saying I manipulated her? Susan paused. Yes. That was the moment something snapped cleanly into place. This wasn't about the house anymore. It was about punishment. And my family had just accused me of something that would follow me forever if I didn't stop it. I hung up and stared at the wall. For years, I'd been invisible. Now, suddenly, I was dangerous. And that meant I was finally close to the truth they were so desperate to bury. What they didn't know yet was that my grandmother had left more than instructions. She had left evidence, and I was about to bring it into the light. The accusation changed everything. Up until that moment, this had been framed as a disagreement, a misunderstanding, a messy family conflict over property and feelings. The second my father accused me of manipulating my grandmother, it became something else entirely. It became a line. Susan Walker didn't sugarcoat it when I met her the next morning. Undue influence is serious, she said, tapping the file on her desk. If it sticks, it doesn't just affect the house. It affects your credibility. Permanently. I sat very still. He's lying. I know, Susan replied calmly. But the court doesn't run on what we know. It runs on what we can prove. She slid a document toward me. My father's filing. Richard Miller's name printed neatly at the top, accusing his own daughter of coercing an elderly woman for financial gain. I felt something cold and steady replace the last traces of hurt. He couldn't beat me quietly, I said, so he decided to smear me. Susan nodded. That's often how this goes. What do? We respond with facts, she said, and timing. She opened a different folder. Thinner, older. Margaret Miller anticipated this, Susan continued. Not this exact accusation, but conflict. She pulled out a yellowed envelope. My grandmother's handwriting. Claire. My breath caught. She asked me to hold this unless her intentions were challenged, Susan said. That's the condition she gave me. Inside the envelope were 3 things: a handwritten letter, a notarized statement, and a USB drive. Susan let me take my time. The letter was addressed to me. Claire, if you're reading this, it means they've decided to turn on you instead of telling the truth. I'm sorry. I hoped they wouldn't, but I prepared anyway. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't tighten. I felt ready. The notarized statement was blunt. Margaret Miller, of sound mind, affirming that she had discussed her estate with multiple professionals, that no beneficiary had influenced her decisions, and that any claim of coercion was false. The USB drive was labeled simply, Home. Susan watched my face. She documented everything. I swallowed. What kind of everything? Audio, video, notes, Susan said. Years' worth. My grandmother hadn't just trusted me, she'd protected me. We didn't submit it immediately. Susan was strategic. Let them talk. Let them build their story. Then we dismantle it cleanly. At work, I moved like nothing had changed. I carried plates. I smiled at customers. I rang in orders. I trained a new server named Lily Harper, 22, nervous and eager. People underestimate this job, she said one night. They always do, I replied. Tom Alvarez pulled me aside near the end of the week. Your dad called, he said carefully. My eyebrows lifted. Here? Asked for you. I told him we don't share schedules. Thank you. Tom studied me. You okay? I will be. He nodded once. That was it. No advice, no pity. Meanwhile, the narrative started shifting. Rachel told relatives I was greedy, that I'd turned on the family, that I was trying to steal her future. Helen stopped responding to messages from extended family entirely. Silence was her shield. Richard, according to Susan, was pushing hard, claiming emotional manipulation, claiming dependency, painting me as the fragile daughter who needed saving from herself. What he didn't know was that every lie he told made the truth sharper. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing. Susan prepped me carefully. Say less, she instructed. Let the evidence speak. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, from memory. I replayed moments I'd dismissed for years. Conversations with my grandmother. The way she'd pause before speaking. The way she'd repeat important things twice. Pay attention to who rushes you, Claire. People reveal themselves when they want something fast. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant. Richard sat at the opposite table in a navy suit I'd seen him wear to weddings and funerals. He didn't look at me. Rachel sat behind him, jaw tight, arms crossed. Helen wasn't there. Susan Walker took her place beside me, calm and composed. The judge, Honorable Denise Caldwell, reviewed the filings quietly. Mr. Miller, Judge Caldwell said, looking at my father, you are alleging undue influence by your daughter, Claire Miller, on the decedent, Margaret Miller. Yes, Your Honor, Richard replied. My mother was vulnerable, confused. Susan stood. Your Honor, we respectfully contest that claim. She handed over the notarized statement. The judge read it carefully. Then Susan said, and with the court's permission, we'd like to submit additional documentation. She pressed play. The courtroom filled with my grandmother's voice. Clear, sharp, unmistakable. I am making these decisions because they are fair, not because anyone told me to. If my son claims otherwise, he is lying. Rachel's head snapped up. Richard stiffened. Susan didn't smile. She didn't need to. Judge Caldwell raised an eyebrow. Is there more? Susan nodded. Yes, Your Honor. She played another clip. My grandmother again. Claire never asked me for anything. If anything, I had to push her to accept what she deserved. Silence. Richard's attorney whispered urgently to him. Judge Caldwell turned to my father. Do you still wish to pursue this claim? He swallowed. Rachel leaned toward him, whispering fiercely. Richard shook his head, barely perceptible. No, Your Honor, he said quietly. The judge nodded. Then this motion is dismissed. Gavel, just like that. Outside the courtroom, Rachel confronted me. You planned this, she hissed. No, I said calmly. Grandma did. Helen appeared then, pale and shaken. Claire, she said, voice cracking. Why didn't you tell us she recorded things? I looked at her steadily. You never asked what she wanted. You decided. Rachel laughed bitterly. So what now? You think you've won? I met her eyes. No, I said. Now you have to live with what you tried to do. That was the moment. People started looking at me differently. Not as the waitress, not as the screw-up, but as someone who didn't fold when pushed. The hearing didn't end the fight. It escalated it. Because when people fail to erase you quietly, they try to break you loudly. And my family still had one move left. One that would cost them far more than a house. The backlash came quietly at first. No shouting. No more legal threats. Just absence. Rachel stopped pretending I existed. Helen stopped calling entirely. Richard stopped showing up at family gatherings that he knew I'd attend. It was as if they'd all agreed on the new strategy. If they couldn't beat me, they'd erase me socially. They underestimated how familiar that already felt. What changed was everyone else. Aunts who had once nodded along with Rachel's version of events started asking questions. Cousins texted me privately instead of posting vague quotes about loyalty. Someone leaked the hearing audio. I never found out who. I didn't ask. The truth doesn't need managing. It just needs air. At Trattoria Leone, things shifted too. Customers recognized me from the clip circulating online. Not as a spectacle, but as a person who stood her ground. One woman, probably in her 60s, squeezed my hand after paying. I wish I'd had your backbone at your age, she said. I smiled politely. I didn't tell her it wasn't backbone. It was exhaustion. Tom Alvarez called me into the office one afternoon. I've been thinking, he said, leaning back in his chair. You ever consider management? I blinked. Here? Why not? You already run half the floor. I thought about the years I'd been told waiting tables wasn't a future. That it was temporary. That it was something to apologize for. When would this start? I asked. Now, if you want. I said yes. Rachel found out 2 days later. She showed up at the restaurant during dinner rush. Not at my table. At the bar. She waited until I passed, then spoke loudly enough for the bartender to hear. So now you're playing boss? I didn't stop walking. I've always been working. She followed me to the service station. You embarrassed us, she said. And now you think you get rewarded? I faced her calmly. I didn't embarrass you. I refuse to lie. She scoffed. You're still just a waitress. I leaned closer, my voice even. And you're still afraid of what that means. Her face flushed. This isn't over. I nodded. I know. The next move came from Richard. Not directly, through money. Susan called me on a Monday morning. Your father has filed a petition to dissolve the trust, she said. Not to sell, to nullify it. My jaw tightened. On what grounds this time? Claiming administrative burden, that it's impractical. And if it works, the assets would revert to the estate, which he controls. I closed my eyes. This is his last real play, Susan continued. If he wins, the house gets liquidated and distributed however he sees fit. And if he loses? Susan paused. Then he loses standing. Permanently. I exhaled slowly. What do you need from me? Patience, she said. And one more thing. What? Your grandmother's journals. I thought of the box, still under my bed. I have them, I said. Good, bring them. We met 2 days later. Susan flipped through the notebooks carefully. Margaret Miller had dated everything. Recorded conversations, listed reasons. Susan smiled faintly. This woman was meticulous. She didn't trust them, I said quietly. She trusted you, Susan corrected. The hearing was scheduled for early December, right before Christmas. Of course it was. The night before, Helen finally called. Her voice sounded thinner. Claire, please. I closed my eyes. Your father is under a lot of stress, she said. This isn't good for his health. You didn't worry about mine, I replied. She inhaled sharply. We didn't think it would go this far. You did, I said. You just didn't think I'd stop you. She cried softly. You're tearing the family apart. No, I said calmly. I'm stopping you from doing it quietly. At the hearing, Richard looked tired, older than I remembered. The judge, again Denise Caldwell, reviewed the filings. Susan spoke first, calm, measured. She submitted the journals. Judge Caldwell read excerpts silently, then looked up. Mr. Miller, she said, your mother anticipated conflict. She addressed it directly. repeatedly. Richard's lawyer tried to argue administrative difficulty. Judge Caldwell raised a hand. "This trust is neither impractical nor ambiguous," she said. "It is explicit." She looked at my father. "Your petition is denied." Final. Outside the courthouse, snow had started falling. Rachel didn't come near me. Helen didn't look up. Richard didn't say a word. Susan turned to me. "It's done." I nodded. That should have been the end. But revenge doesn't always come from escalation. Sometimes it comes from stepping forward. A week later, Tom officially promoted me to floor manager. 2 weeks after that, the restaurant owner asked me to help open a second location. I said yes. Rachel lost her job in January. Company restructuring, budget cuts. The same phrases she'd once used on me. She called me drunk one night. "I gave everything to them," she slurred. "And they still chose you." "They didn't choose me," I said gently. "They just stopped being able to ignore me." She hung up. By spring, the house was no longer the center of the fight. I was, and that terrified them more than any lawsuit ever could. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was moving forward. And what came next would force my family to confront something they'd avoided my entire life. The truth that I never needed their permission, and that their power over me had always been borrowed. Power shifts are rarely loud. Most of the time, they sound like doors closing behind you, without anyone noticing you're no longer waiting on the other side. By February, I was working fewer tables and running more meetings. Inventory, staffing, vendor calls, scheduling conflicts, cash flow projections for the second location. Tom Alvarez stopped double-checking my decisions. The owner, Frank DeLuca, started looping me into conversations he used to reserve for accountants. "You see things," Frank said one afternoon, tapping a spreadsheet. "That's rare." I thought about all the years my family told me I saw too much. At home, my phone stayed quiet. No messages from Helen. No updates from Richard. Rachel sent one text in early February. "I'm staying with a friend." I didn't reply. Then, on a slow Wednesday afternoon, Susan Walker called. "Claire," she said, her voice measured, "your father's attorney reached out." I leaned against the prep counter, watching Lily Harper polish glasses nearby. What does he want now? To negotiate. I closed my eyes briefly. Negotiate what? The trust? The house? Everything. I laughed once, quietly. He lost. "Yes," Susan agreed. "Which is why he wants terms." "What kind?" Susan paused. "He wants you to buy him out." The words settled slowly. "Buy him out of what?" I asked. "Of the house," she said. "And his remaining interest." I pictured Richard Miller, proud, stubborn, asking for money from the daughter he'd dismissed for years. "How much?" I asked. Susan exhaled. "More than it's worth. He's framing it as compensation for stress." I smiled without warmth. "Of course he is." "Claire," Susan said carefully, "you don't have to engage." "I know," I replied, "but I want to hear him say it." We scheduled a meeting. Neutral location, Susan's office. 2 attorneys. No Rachel, no Helen. Richard arrived late. He looked thinner. His suit hung a little loose. His confidence hadn't vanished, but it had cracks now. He didn't look at me when he sat down. Susan opened with formalities. Terms, history, the court's rulings. Then Richard finally spoke. "I want closure," he said. Susan raised an eyebrow. "By demanding above-market compensation?" Richard's jaw tightened. "I built that house." "No," I said calmly. "You lived in it." Silence. "I raised you there," he snapped. "And I raised myself," I replied. "Mostly alone." He looked at me then. Really looked. "You think this makes you powerful," he said. "You think you won." "I didn't win," I said. "You lost control. There's a difference." Susan slid a document toward him. "This is the current valuation," she said. "This is what's reasonable." Richard didn't touch it. "I won't accept less," he said. "You owe me." I leaned forward slightly. "I don't owe you silence anymore," I said. "That's all that changed." He stood abruptly. "Then we're done here." Susan nodded. "Then we'll proceed accordingly." Richard left, without shaking hands. Susan turned to me once the door closed. "He's bluffing," she said. "He needs the money." "I know," I replied, "but I don't need the house." That was the moment I understood leverage fully. Not as force, as freedom. A week later, the house went back on the market. Not quietly. A sign appeared in the yard. An open house scheduled. Photos online. Extended family noticed. So did Rachel. She showed up at the restaurant again. This time, she waited until after closing. She stood near the bar, arms wrapped around herself, eyes glassy. "You're really letting them lose it," she said. I wiped down the counter slowly. "They made their choices," I replied. She laughed bitterly. "You act like this is all so clean." "It is," I said. "That's what bothers you." She stepped closer. "You could stop this." I met her eyes. "Why would I?" "Because we're sisters." I paused. "Rachel," I said, "you stopped being my sister the day you spoke for me like I wasn't there." She flinched. "I did what I had to," she said. "So did I." She left without another word. In March, Frank DeLuca offered me a partnership stake in the second location, 10%. On paper, with growth incentives. "You've earned it," he said. I signed. That same week, Susan called again. "Your father accepted an offer," she said. "Not mine," I replied. "No," she said. "A developer." The house sold fast, below market. Richard didn't get what he wanted. Helen moved into a smaller rental across town. No forwarding address was sent to me. I didn't ask for one. The final paperwork arrived on a Tuesday. Susan handed it to me in person. "This closes it," she said. "No more claims. No more leverage." I nodded. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. I expected to feel relief. Instead, I felt something else. Space. The next morning, I found a box at my door. No note. No return address. Inside were photo albums. Grandma Margaret's handwriting on the cover. Claire. I sat on the floor and flipped through them slowly. Photos of birthdays, holidays, me in the background. Me holding plates. Me watching. On the last page, a note fell out. "I saw you, even when they didn't." I folded it carefully. This wasn't the end, but it was the moment I stopped waiting for one. Because the real revenge wasn't the house. It wasn't the court. It was the fact that I was building something they could no longer touch. And soon, they would realize just how far I'd gone without them. The first invitation arrived in a cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. Rachel Miller's name was printed neatly on the front, along with her husband's, Daniel Brooks. Inside was an announcement for a charity fundraising gala benefiting a regional arts foundation. Formal attire. Press expected. My parents' names listed as major donors. My name was nowhere on it. I found the envelope tucked under my apartment door, slid halfway inside like it had been delivered by mistake. Or intention. I stared at it for a long time before opening it fully. At the bottom, in smaller print, was a handwritten note from Helen Miller. "It would mean a lot if you didn't attend." I laughed once. Not loud, just enough to let the sound out of my chest. The gala mattered to them. Image always did. It was the kind of night where stories got told and retold, where success was curated and failure quietly edited out. Rachel had spent years building a narrative. The accomplished daughter, the stable one, the one my parents could stand next to without explaining. And now that narrative had cracks. I didn't plan to go. Not at first. Then Frank DeLuca called. "Claire," he said, "you busy Saturday night?" "Probably," I replied. "Why?" "My wife's company bought a table at that arts gala. She can't make it. Want the seat?" I paused. Same event, same night. "What's the dress code?" I asked. He chuckled. Uncomfortable. "I'll be there," I said. I didn't tell my family. I didn't need to. On the night of the gala, I finished my shift early, showered, put on a simple black dress I'd bought years ago for interviews I never went to. No jewelry except my grandmother's ring. Hair pulled back. Clean. Unassuming. When I arrived, the hotel ballroom was already buzzing. Champagne glasses clinked. Cameras flashed. Laughter floated over the hum of conversation. I spotted Rachel immediately. She stood near the center of the room in a tailored red gown, hand resting lightly on Daniel's arm. Posture perfect. Helen and Richard stood nearby, smiling at people who nodded approvingly. They hadn't seen me yet. I took my seat at Frank's table near the edge of the room. Not hidden. Just not central. The program began. Speeches, applause, a short video montage highlighting community leaders. Then came the donor acknowledgments. "And we'd like to thank the Miller family," the host announced, "for their generous contribution." Applause filled the room. Richard raised his glass. Helen beamed. Rachel glanced around, eyes shining. Then the host continued. In addition, we want to recognize Claire Miller, whose recent partnership helped make this evening possible. The room went quiet, not silent, but stunned. I felt Frank glance at me, surprised. The spotlight shifted. People turned. Rachel's smile froze. Helen's face drained of color. Richard looked like someone had knocked the air out of him. I stood calmly, lifting my glass slightly in acknowledgement. I hadn't donated personally. Frank had. In my name. After I helped him restructure a vendor deal that saved his company 6 figures. He insisted. People should know who actually does the work, he'd said. The applause resumed. Hesitant at first, then stronger. I sat back down. Rachel excused herself immediately. Helen followed. Richard stayed, jaw tight, eyes fixed forward. After the program ended, conversations erupted. People approached me, introduced themselves, asked what I did. I manage operations, I said simply. No defensiveness, no explanations. Rachel found me near the bar. What are you doing here? She hissed. I met her gaze. I was invited. By who? Someone who wanted me here. She laughed sharply. You planned this. No, I said. I accepted an opportunity. She leaned closer. You're embarrassing Mom and Dad. I tilted my head. You didn't want me here because I didn't fit the story. Her eyes flashed. You don't. I do now. She stepped back like she'd been slapped. Helen approached then, face tight with panic. Claire, she whispered. This wasn't appropriate. I looked at her calmly. Neither was erasing me. Richard joined us, voice low and controlled. You enjoy this? He asked. No, I said. I enjoy being honest. His eyes hardened. You think people respect you now? I think they see me, I replied. That's enough. Daniel Brooks, Rachel's husband, stood awkwardly nearby, clearly unsure where to look. Rachel, he said quietly, we should go. She shook her head. Furious. No. I turned to Daniel. Congratulations on the promotion, by the way. He blinked. How did you? I read, I said. Rachel stared at him. What promotion? He looked uncomfortable. I told you I was up for it. You didn't tell me you got it, she snapped. I watched the crack widen, not with satisfaction, with inevitability. I left shortly after. I didn't linger, didn't soak in attention. That night wasn't about winning. It was about visibility. The next morning, my phone buzzed with messages. Cousins, old family friends, even one of Helen's book club members. Proud of you. Didn't know you were involved in all that. You handled yourself well. Rachel didn't text. Helen didn't call. Richard sent a single message. You've made your point. I replied once. I didn't make a point. I stopped hiding. 2 weeks later, Frank finalized paperwork for the second location. He named me director of operations across both restaurants. Title, authority, pay. It wasn't revenge. It was progress. And progress terrifies people who rely on hierarchy. Rachel found out through LinkedIn. She blocked me again. This time, I didn't notice until days later. The gala didn't end my family's resentment, but it changed something important. It shifted the audience. Because the most dangerous thing you can do to people who control the narrative is step into the light without asking permission. And the next place that light was going to shine was somewhere even more uncomfortable. A holiday table they no longer controlled. And a truth they wouldn't be able to edit out. Thanksgiving arrived without a phone call. No group text. No passive-aggressive reminder. No just checking message from my mother pretending nothing had changed. The silence felt intentional, curated, like everything else they did when control slipped. I made plans anyway. I volunteered for the Thanksgiving shift at the restaurant. Triple pay. Short-staffed. Frank didn't argue when I asked for full authority that day. Run it how you want, he said. People will be grateful just to eat. He was right. By noon, Trattoria Leone was full. Families, couples, people avoiding their own kitchens and their own histories. The air smelled like roasted turkey and garlic and wine. I moved through it all calmly, checking on servers, fixing mistakes before they escalated, talking to the kitchen like a translator between pressure and pride. Lily Harper caught up to me near the service station. You okay today? She asked. I am, I said, and meant it. Around 3, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Helen. I didn't answer immediately. I waited until I had a second, then stepped into the back hallway. "Hello," I said. "Claire," she said, voice tight. "Are you working?" "Yes." A pause. "We're having dinner at 6, I figured. Richard wants to know if you're coming." I leaned against the wall, listening to the hum of refrigerators and distant voices. "No," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "He thinks you're punishing us." I smiled faintly. "I'm feeding people who asked me to be here." She sighed. "Rachel's upset." I didn't respond. Helen continued. "She feels like you're trying to replace her." I closed my eyes briefly. "I'm not trying to replace anyone," I said. "I'm just not disappearing anymore." "She says you're doing this on purpose. The timing, the gala, everything." I thought of the envelope, the handwritten note asking me not to attend. "Tell Rachel," I said calmly, "that I'm not organizing my life around her comfort." Helen's voice softened. "You used to." "I know." She didn't argue. After we hung up, I went back out onto the floor. An older man stopped me near the host stand. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you the manager?" "Yes." He smiled warmly. "I just wanted to say thank you. My wife passed last year. This is my first Thanksgiving alone. Your staff has been kind." I nodded. "I'm glad you came." That was my Thanksgiving. Not the table I grew Rachel had curated. Not the one with assigned seats and unspoken rules. This one was honest. Later that night, after closing, Frank poured a glass of wine and handed it to me. "You handled today well," he said. "Thank you. You ever think about owning your own place?" he asked casually. I raised an eyebrow. "Not tomorrow," he added, "but someday." I thought about Grandma Margaret, about journals and notes and quiet preparation. "Yes," I said. "I think about it." 2 days later, Rachel showed up at my apartment. She didn't text. She didn't call. She just knocked like she owned the space. I opened the door and found her standing there with no makeup, hair pulled back, coat wrinkled. "You didn't come," she said. I stepped aside. "You should sit." She walked in slowly, eyes scanning the room like she was searching for proof of something. "This is smaller than I thought," she said. I nodded. "It fits me." She sat on the couch, rubbing her hands together. "Mom cried," she said. I stayed standing. "She said Thanksgiving felt wrong without you." I didn't reply. Rachel looked up at me. "Do you hate us?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I said. "I just don't negotiate my dignity anymore." Her jaw tightened. "You think you're better than us now." "No," I replied. "I think I'm done being less." She stood abruptly. "You always make everything sound so final." "That's because you only hear me when I stop being flexible." She laughed bitterly. "You don't understand how hard it is for me." I met her eyes. "I understand exactly how hard it is to live inside expectations you didn't choose." She stared at me, something like fear flickering across her face. "You're not supposed to be the strong one," she said quietly. I tilted my head. "Why not?" She didn't answer. When she left, she didn't slam the door. She closed it carefully, like she was afraid of breaking something else. In December, the restaurant opened its second location. I spent nights there. Early mornings, training sessions, supplier meetings, budget reviews. People started introducing me as the one who runs things. I didn't correct them. One afternoon, Susan Walker called. "Just updating you," she said. "Your father withdrew the last remaining petition. It's over." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you." "There's something else," she added. "Your grandmother's trust is now fully executed. Your portion has been dispersed." I froze. "Dispersed how?" Susan smiled through the phone. "In cash, as she intended." The amount wasn't life-changing, but it was validating. I used part of it to pay down debt, part to invest quietly, part to help Lily with a certification program she couldn't afford. Rachel found out about the trust payout through someone else. She texted me once. "So Grandma really chose you," I replied. "She chose fairness." She didn't answer. Christmas came and went. No invitations. No confrontations. Just space. And space, I was learning, is where healing begins. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering clearly. Because the final shift wasn't about money or houses or galas. It was about the moment my family realized something they could never undo. They no longer defined me. And the next time we sat across from each other, it wouldn't be as parent and child, or sister and sister. It would be as equals. A reckoning they had spent my entire life trying to avoid. And it was coming. The invitation arrived by email this time. No gold envelope, no handwritten note. Just a forwarded message from my cousin Jenna Miller with a subject line that felt deliberately neutral. Family meeting, December 28th. I stared at the screen longer than I needed to. Family meeting meant intervention. Or reconciliation theater. Or an attempt to reset the hierarchy under the guise of moving forward. Jenna added one line beneath the forwarded message. Mom says it's important. She asked me to make sure you saw this. Of course she did. The meeting was scheduled at my parents' house. Early evening, after work. Convenient for everyone, except me. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I went to the second restaurant and stayed late, walking the floor after closing, checking numbers, watching how people moved when they thought no one important was watching. Power is easiest to understand in quiet rooms. Frank DeLuca joined me near the bar. You look like you're deciding something, he said. I am. He nodded. Whatever it is, don't rush it. I smiled faintly. That's the lesson this year keeps teaching me. The next morning, I replied to Jen, I'll be there. The house looked smaller when I arrived, not physically, structurally. Boxes lined one wall of the living room, half-packed, labeled in my mother's neat handwriting. Richard Miller stood near the fireplace, arms folded. Helen sat on the couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Rachel stood by the window, phone in hand, pretending to scroll. Jenna gave me a small, relieved smile. Thanks for coming, she whispered. I nodded and took a seat opposite my parents. No one offered me a drink. Richard cleared his throat. We're here to talk like adults. I didn't respond. Helen spoke next. This year has been difficult. For you, I thought, but said nothing. Rachel finally turned toward me. You didn't have to take things this far. I met her eyes calmly. You didn't have to take them anywhere at all. She scoffed. You could have just let it go. Richard leaned forward. You embarrassed us, publicly. I tilted my head. You accused me of manipulating Grandma. In court. That was legal strategy, he snapped. No, I said. That was character assassination. Silence settled. Helen's voice shook. We didn't expect everything to unravel like this. You didn't expect me to stand up, I replied. Rachel laughed bitterly. You act like this is some kind of victory. I looked at her. Really looked. This isn't about winning, I said. It's about stopping. Stopping what? She demanded. Stopping the assumption that I'll absorb whatever you decide, I said. Stopping the idea that my silence means consent. Richard's jaw tightened. You've changed. Yes, I said. That's the point. Helen wiped her eyes. We raised you better than this. I leaned forward slightly. You raised me to be useful, quiet, reliable. I raised myself to be honest. Rachel shook her head. You always twist things. I didn't argue. Instead, I reached into my bag and placed something on the coffee table. Grandma Margaret's journals. Rachel stared at them. Why are those here? Because this conversation keeps circling around what you think she wanted, I said. And she was very clear. Richard stood abruptly. We don't need to relitigate the past. We do, I said calmly. Because you keep rewriting it. I opened one of the journals and read aloud. I love all my grandchildren. But Claire listens. She sees what others rush past. If there is conflict, it will not be because she is greedy. It will be because others are afraid of losing control. Helen gasped softly. Rachel's face went pale. Richard said nothing. I closed the journal. She knew, I said. She prepared. And you tried to override her. Rachel found her voice. So what do you want now? An apology? Money? I shook my head. I want boundaries. Richard laughed sharply. Boundaries? Yes, I said. Here they are. I stood. I will not attend family events where I am treated as an inconvenience. I will not be spoken about instead of spoken to. I will not be used as the emotional buffer so you can feel generous. Helen looked up, startled. Claire, I'm not finished, I said, still calm. I won't rescue anyone from consequences they created, financial or emotional. And I will not explain my life choices to make you comfortable. Rachel crossed her arms. So you're cutting us off. I shook my head. No, I'm opting out of dysfunction. Richard's voice was low. You think you're better than us. I met his gaze. I think I'm responsible for myself. That landed heavier than anger ever could. Jenna shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we all need time. Yes, I said. That's exactly right. I picked up my bag. Helen stood. Claire, please. We're family. I looked at her. Really looked. Family doesn't require self-erasure, I said. And if it does, it's not something I can belong to anymore. I walked out without slamming the door. Outside, the air was cold and clean. My hands weren't shaking. I sat in my car for a moment, letting the silence settle. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. 2 days later, Rachel sent me a message. I don't know how to talk to you anymore, I replied once. Then, listen. She didn't answer. By January, the second restaurant was profitable. Lily passed her certification exam. Frank started talking about a third location. Susan Walker sent a final email. All matters closed. No pending actions. I archived it. The family meeting didn't fix anything, but it ended something. The expectation that I would always come back, apologize, and make it easier for everyone else. That version of me was gone. And the version standing now wasn't angry. She was finished negotiating her worth. There was only one chapter left. Not with them, with me. And that was the one that mattered most. January has a way of stripping things down. The decorations come down. The noise fades. What's left is what actually works. By the second week of the year, I was spending more time at the second restaurant than at home. Morning vendor calls, afternoon walkthroughs, evening service checks. The rhythm suited me. Clear expectations, immediate feedback, problems you could fix instead of feelings you had to manage. Frank DeLuca noticed. You don't hover, he said one morning as we reviewed numbers. You let people do their jobs. I trust them, I replied, and I watch the system. He smiled. That's the difference. We were discussing the third location when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, Susan Walker emailed. Call me when you have a second. I stepped into the office and dialed her back. Claire, she said, this isn't legal trouble, but it involves your family. I closed the door. Go on. Your parents are applying for a private loan. They listed you as a character reference. I laughed once, short and surprised. Without asking? Yes. And? The lender called me, Susan said calmly. They're doing due diligence. Your name came up because of the trust documentation. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. They're trying to use proximity, I said, not permission. That's my read, Susan replied. Do you want to be contacted? No, I said immediately. And I don't consent to being referenced. Understood. I'll notify them. After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment. Even now, even after courtrooms and boundaries and silence, they were still trying to pull me back into the role of quiet support beam. The one you lean on without acknowledging. I didn't call them. I didn't text. I went back to work. That night, Rachel emailed me. Not a text, not a message. An email, like a paper trail might make it safer. Subject: we need to talk. I didn't open it until the next morning. Claire, Mom and Dad are struggling. I know things have been bad, but this is serious. They're trying to keep things together. I'm asking you, as your sister, to help smooth this out. Just talk to them. Please. No apology, no acknowledgement, just urgency. I replied with one sentence. I'm not available to manage outcomes I didn't create. I archived the thread. Later that week, Frank asked me to sit in on a meeting with an investor group interested in the third location. They'll want to hear operations, he said, not vision statements. The meeting was at a downtown office, glass walls and polished wood. 3 men, 1 woman. Clean notebooks, focused questions. They asked about turnover rates, training systems, margin control. I answered calmly, with numbers. At the end, the woman leaned back and smiled. You started as a server? She asked. Yes. That shows, she said. In the best way. We shook hands. Nothing flashy, no promises. But when I walked out, I felt something shift again. Not upward, forward. That Friday, Lily Harper knocked on my office door. Do you have a minute? Of course. She sat down, twisting her hands. I got accepted into the management track. I smiled. You earned it. She hesitated. I was afraid to tell you, like I'd be stepping on something. I shook my head. There's room. Her shoulders relaxed. After she left, I thought about the difference between leadership and control. One creates space, the other consumes it. The following Sunday, my mother showed up at the restaurant. Not during rush, not during quiet. Mid-afternoon. Calculated. I saw her before she saw me. Helen Miller stood near the host stand, coat buttoned, hands clasped tightly in front of her. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not fragile, just unsure. I didn't avoid her. I walked over, calmly. "Hello, Mom." She looked up, startled. "Claire, do you want to sit?" I asked. "I have 10 minutes. She nodded. We took a corner table. "I won't stay long," she said quickly. "I know you're busy." "I am," I replied. "Go ahead." She swallowed. "Your father didn't mean to put you in that position." I waited. "He's overwhelmed," she continued. "Things didn't turn out how we expected." I folded my hands on the table. "What do you need, Mom?" She looked down. "We need help." There it was. Not an apology. Not accountability. Need. "I can't," I said gently. Her eyes filled. "You're really going to let us fall?" I met her gaze. "I'm not holding you up anymore." She reached across the table, then stopped herself. "You used to be so understanding." "I used to disappear," I corrected. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I don't know how to talk to you now." I softened my voice, not my boundary. "You can talk to me when it's not about fixing something," I said, "or using me as proof you're okay." She nodded slowly, like she was trying to memorize the rules. "I should go," she said. I stood. "Take care, Mom." She paused at the door, turned back. "I am proud of you," she said quietly. I held her gaze. "I know," and I did. That was the difference. That evening, Frank called. "They're in," he said. "We're greenlit for the 3rd location." I exhaled, a long, steady breath. "Congratulations," he added. "Director of operations across all 3. "Thank you." After the call, I sat alone in my apartment, lights low. I didn't celebrate loudly. I didn't post anything. I thought about Grandma Margaret, about journals and patience and timing, about the girl who carried trays and learned to listen because no one else did. The family didn't collapse. They recalibrated without me. And that was the point. Because the final chapter wasn't about confrontation or victory. It was about choosing what comes next. And in a few weeks, I was going to make a decision that would seal it. Not against them. For me, the decision arrived quietly, the way the important ones always did. Not in a meeting. Not in a confrontation. Not even in a moment of anger. It came on a Tuesday morning, over coffee that had gone cold while I stared at a legal pad on my kitchen table. 3 columns. Stay. Expand. Leave. I didn't label them with emotions, just outcomes. Stay meant continuing to build something solid, visible, respected. It meant security, influence, a life I'd earned inch by inch. Expand meant ownership, risk. Stepping out from under Frank DeLuca's umbrella and seeing if I could hold the weight myself. Leave meant something else entirely. Not escape. Choice. I circled the middle column. That afternoon, I called Susan Walker. "I need an LLC," I said, "and I need it clean." She didn't ask why. She never did. "What's the purpose?" she asked. "Restaurant ownership," I replied. "Minority partner buy-in. Option to convert to majority within 18 months. She paused. "You've thought this through." "I always do," I said. "People just don't notice until it's done." We met 2 days later. Papers signed, structure defined. My name printed clearly where it belonged. Claire Miller Holdings. No family initials. No legacy language. Mine. I told Frank the following week. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, studying me. "So this is you leaving?" he asked. "This is me growing," I replied. "I want in. As an owner." He smiled slowly. "I was wondering when you'd say that." We negotiated numbers, percentages, exit clauses, everything transparent. When we shook hands, it felt equal. Rachel found out through a mutual acquaintance. She showed up at my apartment that night. Again. This time, she knocked softly. I opened the door and found her holding a folder. "I need to talk," she said. I stepped aside. She didn't comment on the apartment this time. She sat down carefully, like someone entering unfamiliar territory. "I'm not doing well," she said. I waited. "I lost the job," she continued. "The savings went faster than I thought. Mark and I are fighting all the time. She looked up at me. I don't know who I am without being the successful one. I recognized the fear in her voice, the same one that had driven so many of her choices. I can't fix that for you, I said calmly. I know, she replied. I don't know how you did. I tilted my head. Did what? Stopped needing them, she said. Stopped needing me. I considered that. I didn't stop needing connection, I said. I stopped accepting conditions. She nodded slowly. I brought something, she said, sliding the folder across the table. Inside were copies of emails, old ones, between her and Richard, between her and Helen. Messages where plans were made, decisions justified. My name mentioned like a variable, not a person. I thought if I went along with them, I'd be safe, she said. Chosen. I closed the folder. This doesn't change the past, I said. I know, she replied quickly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for honesty. I met her eyes. You benefited from their favoritism, I said. And you enforced it. She nodded, tears gathering but not falling. Yes. Silence filled the room. I'm not ready for a relationship with you, I said finally, but I appreciate the truth. She accepted that without argument. That was new. Before she left, she paused at the door. You were always stronger than me, she said quietly. I just didn't know how to live without being above someone. After she left, I sat alone, feeling the weight of what she'd said. The next day, Helen sent a text. Rachel told me she spoke to you. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to work. The third location's lease was finalized, build-out scheduled, hiring plans drafted. I spent hours with architects and contractors, translating ideas into systems. One afternoon, Lily Harper caught me in the hallway. I got promoted, she said, beaming. Assistant manager. I smiled. Good. Don't shrink for anyone. She nodded like she understood exactly what that meant. By the end of the month, my life looked nothing like it had a year earlier. Different routines, different conversations, different silences. The family noise had faded into something distant. Not gone, just no longer central. One evening, as I locked up the restaurant, my phone buzzed. Richard Miller. I let it ring. He didn't leave a voicemail. He sent a message instead. I hear you're buying in. I always knew you were capable. I stared at the screen. Then I deleted it. Capability without respect is just another form of exploitation. I didn't need his acknowledgement now. Or ever. That night, I slept deeply because the last thing tying me to that old version of myself was gone. The girl who waited to be chosen. The woman who stood now didn't wait, she decided. And the final chapter wouldn't be about reconciliation or revenge. It would be about arrival, on my terms, in my name, with nothing left to prove. The opening day of my restaurant didn't feel dramatic. No ribbon, no speech, no family in the corner pretending to be proud. Just keys in my hand and a quiet moment before the doors opened. The sign read, Miller Street Kitchen. Not because of my last name, but because of the road it sat on. I'd chosen that on purpose. No symbolism I'd have to explain. No legacy anyone could argue over. Ownership papers sat in my bag. 51%. Clear. Final. Frank DeLuca stopped by mid-morning. He looked around, nodding slowly. You built something solid, he said. I learned from watching cracks, I replied. By noon, the place was full. Not chaotic, just alive. Servers moved with confidence. The kitchen hummed. Lily Harper, now a manager in her own right, ran Expo like she'd been doing it for years. I stayed out of the way. That was the point. In the late afternoon, I stepped outside for air and found Helen standing across the street. She hadn't crossed over. She hadn't waved. She just stood there, watching through the window. I didn't go to her. After a moment, she turned and walked away. That was the closest thing to closure we were going to get. Rachel didn't come. Richard didn't call. Jenna texted congratulations. Susan Walker sent a short note. Proud of you. Enjoy the quiet. I did. Weeks passed. Life settled into a rhythm that didn't revolve around anticipation or defense. I worked. I planned. I slept. I laughed. I chose when to be available. One night, after closing, I sat alone at the bar and thought about the girl I used to be, the one who carried trays and swallowed words, the one who mistook endurance for loyalty. The one who believed being needed was the same as being valued. She did the best she could with what she had. But she wasn't who I was anymore. The truth is, this wasn't a revenge story in the way people expect. I didn't destroy my family. I didn't expose secrets for spectacle. I didn't win by making them lose. I won by stepping out of a system that required my silence to function, by refusing to be the background character in my own life. My parents still live nearby. We don't talk. That may change someday, or it may not. Either way, I'm done waiting for permission to exist fully. Rachel and I exchanged the occasional neutral message. Nothing deep, nothing cruel. Just distance with honesty. That's more than we ever had before. And me? I wake up knowing exactly where I stand. Here's what I learned. If your value depends on how quiet you are, you're in the wrong room. If love requires self-erasure, it isn't love. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is building a life so full that there's no space left for people who only saw you when they needed something. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Especially if you've ever had to walk away from a role that kept you small. You're not cruel for choosing yourself. You're just finally being honest, and that changes everything.